ask you guys, this is sort of billed as the Jesus music, panel discussion thing. Are you interested in, and I think you would be, first of all, I'm kind of their younger brother. I came along, they had already been there and done that by the time I ever got on the scene. So I get lumped in with these literally invented the genre guys, but that's not quite the case. But are you interested in some of that stuff, and then also interested in other sort of general artist songwriting questions, things like that? Is it kind of both and rather than either or? Bueller, anyone? Okay. All right.
Well, if you could at all touch on that song you sang about the caves, your thought process in developing that song, it's an incredible song.
Oh, thank you. Well, the song is called Man of the Tombs, and it's just us musicians, isn't it? Actually, and I don't mean to make you feel uncomfortable in saying this, but to answer your question very truthfully and succinctly, my marriage was breaking up and I was living apart from my family, hoping that that might come to a conclusion and I would go back with them. That did not happen. So I'm alone and I'm miserable and unteachable and crummy and all the rest of it. And I'm flipping through the Bible, playing Bible roulette, and I come upon the story of the Gadarene demoniac, and I say to myself in the privacy of myself, oh my God, that's me. And so as I began to write the song, I realized that I was, not only writing a biography, but also writing an autobiography. And what had never occurred to me before is I got seduced by all of the demonic action and the deliverance and the drama of the moment. And what I forgot about is that he was just a flesh and blood man like me. And that gave me the insight to say that people who are capable of monstrous behavior are not always monsters themselves. That complicates the thing. That makes it harder because we don't have an easy white hat, black hat type of operation. So when I wrote the song, that's what I wanted to get at. The only technical thing that I had to solve is how do I solve what I call the pig problem? How do I solve that part of the story? Because I've already got like a 6-minute song going anyway. So what do I do with that? So the line that I came up with is, in only a moment and only a word, the evil departs like a thundering herd. And so with that, I can dispense with that whole sequence for those who are in the know, and for people who don't know the story, they'll just kind of go, huh? For a minute. Yeah. So that was that.
Wow. Yeah, it's heavy. You're like a professor.
Which is so funny because I sat in the student center and drank coffee and said, hey, they don't make me go to class. I'm not going.
So then the Jewish movement.
Well, I don't know, I first met, Alex McDougall and I met in 1971, and he was living in a commune, and then I knew his brother as a guitar player, so we were both going to Calvary Chapel. Although you might have been too spiritual for Calvary Chapel at that time.
I was still Calvary. Yeah.
You were still Calvary guy? No, but these guys, they were like the totally dedicated guys living in a community.
The sisters would go in the afternoon and dumpster dive for the food for the commune. And we would go out and work, hanging junk mail on doorknobs and whatever, and then our money all went into the pot. We lived that way.
And I bet your rent was like $400 a month, and that was like staggering.
Yeah, we had 28 people.
Yeah, wasn't there like a place called Philadelphia House and Mansion Messiah?
Yeah.
I visited those places.
Okay, yeah.
71.
Yeah.
Which one?
No, we were in Beriah House, which was also in that same, in Costa Mesa. Funny. Go ahead.
Hey, hi.
Hi. Can I just ask for you guys to all stand up once and introduce yourselves for those of us who can't see you sitting down and for the younger people who don't know?
Yes.
Ashley, thank you very much.
Not making a short joke.
It's okay.
Thank you.
I've been short most of my life. A couple nights nights ago, I played at a benefit in Nashville, and there was tables, and people were sitting at these tables, and I said, so where's the stage? And I looked back, and they had me, my head almost could touch the ceiling. I wanted to make sure that everybody could see. So, okay, we're all going to stand so we can say hello and who we are. In Hawaii.
I'm Alex.
I'm Phil.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Bob.
Phil, Bill, Bob, and Alex.
You have last names?
You have your last name.
McDougall.
Keaggy.
Batstone.
W. Smith.
This is good.
You don't have to do the whole thing standing up. We just wanted to see your faces at least once.
Well, you know what? I don't mind standing for this. This is fun. It's like being on location.
Which I hope to be at a location really wherever I'm at, so it was working out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, great idea. Yes.
Okay, my question is, having been through several movements and ages of the church, through the years, a lot of times people who are getting older sort of look back with nostalgia and say, well, those were the good old days, instead of looking forward and say, okay, God's still working in the world and what's coming with anticipation. So having lived, what are your sense of the church in this age and where the youth are in their minds, and anybody have any comments on that?
That's a good question, really, definitely. Even Tim Moon could answer that sometime.
Yeah.
Is Tim here? Tim, come up here, buddy. Can we let Tim also say a few words? Because Tim is in touch a lot with the street people in San Francisco area, talks to the youth and witnesses and shares the Lord.
Yeah, has always done that for like 30 years. He's been on the streets in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is heaven to me. These guys have been my heroes for over 40 years of doing street. But as far as I'm a non-tech guy, and so I'm just a street musician who gets out there with my guitar and my music and just shares the love of Jesus on people on the streets. And back in the 70s, these guys could tell you it was a great opportunity that churches were commissioning people to go out on the streets and minister, where I don't really see that a whole lot nowadays, where churches are actually just going out on the street and feeding the hungry and giving clothes out and just being out there where Jesus can really work through them. I have young people come and say, well, we want to play to thousands of people. Well, I play to thousands of people every Saturday and Sunday out in San Francisco on Pier 39. We're playing to thousands of people as they're walking by. And so I think sometimes our technology stuff gets in the way of just going out and ministering Jesus' love.
Yeah. Also, like, what's the attitude in terms of like what you remember from the early '70s to today? Is there a void?
Yeah, there is a big void, because I remember, Chuck Smith and Jack Hayford and those people. They were telling us to go out on the streets and minister to people, go to the coffee houses, share Jesus wherever you're at. And and nowadays we don't have a lot. We have a lot of great teaching and a lot of great things in the church, but we don't have the message of going outside those walls and ministering to the people where they're at, and highways and byways. And so there's not that evangelistic kind of thing nowadays. That's what I'm looking for. Evangelistic things aren't happening today like they were back
Yeah,
then.
the songs back then were evangelistic in nature, primarily, which is not found that often lyrically these days. And speaking as a almost 62-year-old now, I would say that there's a whole lot of stuff, and I know you'll relate to this, those of you that are older, but there's a whole lot of stuff that I never signed up for. The hardships of life and whatnot. And, it's a bit like the game of Monopoly. You know, you never know when you're going to hit Park Place, and you never know when, well, hopefully, going to jail. So, and everything in between. So, but you know, you just hang on, and so my hope for the youth is that, you know, 20 and 30 years from now, should the Lord tarry, that they'll realize that they always have Jesus no matter what happens in their lives.
It also will be, I believe, another movement, like the Jesus movement was a powerful move of the Holy Spirit over our nation. And I can believe that can happen again, and perhaps this happening.
Amen.
Right.
And then songs will be birthed, and musicians will go out, and there'll be this. Who knows what may usher that in? It could be like, you know, all of a sudden your iPhones don't work anymore, and you know, you're back to what we were doing when we were young. You know? Just
Tim Cannon string.
You had a question over here.
Yeah, you guys, God was allowing you guys to break through some doors that had been slammed shut for years. And during that time, you know, now I'm going on and everything, you know, going on every movement and stuff. Can you guys think of some experience in that time in your own lives that really, that you were going through and that really, you know, kind of, what were your experiences in that time when you were breaking up those doors? Just one time that really comes to mind.
You want to answer? Can I trade microphones with you?
My answer is easy. These guys had already broken down the doors by the time I showed up. So I didn't do a lot of door breaking, and that's my answer. Over to you.
I mean, did you find any, what were the resistances? How did you deal with that?
Well, for me, there was a big resistance to drums, and so that was a large reason why I got into percussion originally. Because that's kind of okay, I guess. So, you know.
I recall when I was with my band Glass Harp, and we had just done our first album in 1970 for Decca Records, and I was sharing the Lord from the stage. I sometimes do a song by myself and just sing about Jesus, and there used to be resistance. Used to be oftentimes real legalistic Christians who went from being probably radical and mean people to radical and mean people. You know? And I felt they say, you know, you can't be a Christian and play rock and roll, or you can't play electric guitar or something like that. I tell you where I got the most acceptance from. It was from people our age, the age we are now, who were encouraging us. They weren't stuffy people. They were filled with the Holy Spirit, and they were encouraging us young folks to go out and share Jesus Christ. And this is before I ever got involved in any Christian record companies too. This is back in the day when I know Murr was just starting out, and there was Light Records, and all that. But I think when people are hungry and you have something, for instance, one time I got to the gig with the Glass Harp. I got there before them. I drove separately, and so they had car trouble. So I got there, and I had my electric, and I had my classical guitar. And I said to the promoter, I said, I know this crowd's waiting for the band. I'll be glad to go up there and just, you know, share a few songs until they show up. Because, you know, we heard through the grapevine that they're on their way. They found a payphone somewhere. And so I go out there and I sing, you know, a couple Glass Harp type songs, and I sang some new songs I'd written about the Lord. And the audience was like kind of taken back, and then the guys show up, and I plug in and we do our thing. And these two guys came up to me afterward and said, man, I didn't know who you were. I just heard there's a rock band playing, and then you were up on stage singing about God, and I just wanted to throw tomatoes at you, you know. And then he said, then you came on with the band and you played your electric guitar, and he said, now I want to know about this Jesus you were singing. So I don't know if that dovetails into your question, the acceptance and rejection. But I think the most important thing is is that when someone is filled with the Spirit and someone is hungry for the Holy Spirit, and that is a relationship with God, that the Lord will bring this about. That's the miracle, and it all starts and begins and ends with God.
I can relate to what Tim was saying, and growing up in the church, and then in the 60s, early 70s, walking away, I would have been one of those that you sang to. And I just wanted to give a special thank you, Phil, to you, and to you, Bob, because as I met my first wife, and gradually through the process of recommitting my life back to the Lord, back in the day, you guys' music was very instrumental in that, and I thank you.
I'd like to know about songwriting. Can you have words without music? You can't find the music, but you have the words. Or vice versa, you've got a tune, but you can't find the words to put to them. Is it, so what I would like to know is you guys' perspective on that, and how it was for you.
Well, I used to do most of my songwriting with sort of I read in an interview, kind of the Paul Simon method. Guitar is in hand, you're goofing around, you find something that sounds good musically, you start seeing words, nonsense syllables, whatever the case may be, and you're sort of on the hunt for an idea with your guitar in your hand. That used to be my MO. Now I have a tendency to incubate ideas for a long time, and then I set about to writing the lyrics and then try to marry the music to the lyrics at that point. I'm have a little more of an inferiority complex about my music than I do my lyrics. I feel like I have the same deck of 52 musical ideas and I'm trying to shuffle them in a way where I don't get caught. So I think I try to address that on the back end of the process now, but I will literally, or what I will occasionally sit down and ask myself, what am I harping on in conversations? What am I talking about? What's kind of stuck in my mind in terms of what's going on? Is there a song in that? And so that's for me is the process now.
I'm kind of interested or fascinated in your communal experience. I know community is like a big buzzword, and often we're sitting around in church, talking about how can we create community in a time when everything seems so mechanical and assembly line-like in the process. Could you talk a little bit about your experience with that and the successes and the failures and what you have learned and think you can apply today?
Well, I would say that there was a model for communal living in the hippie culture. The difference was we had Bible studies and we didn't sleep with each other. And we had an elder in the house that was the watchdog, and I'm sure those things happen once in a while, but never in any of the houses that I lived in. But they were really happy times, actually, and as I mentioned, our earnings would all go into one common jar, and then the elder would be the one who chose how to spend it and pay the bills, and the sisters would stay home, and it was sort of idealistic, I suppose, but it was working. I have really happy memories of those times. So,
How long were you in that?
probably 2.5 years.
Phil, were you in some kind of similar deal in New York or something?
Yeah, well, we weren't in, it wasn't communal, it was more community. We lived, my wife Brenda and I were up in Freeville, New York. Some of you have heard of Scott Ross.
The Love-In.
Huh? Love-In, yeah, the Love-In. And it was a great vision that Scott had, and his wife, Nedra. Nedra was one of the Ronettes. And the thing, everyone had their own separate quarters. There was a part in the barn, this barn that was renovated. It had a geodesic dome, which was the corn silo. On top of it was a beautiful thing. And you guys can sit down, but I can still stand. And, because I need to. But the thing where it kind of went a little bit awry was when kind of the shepherding movement kind of was going. And when the downside of what that was about was they were kind of cloning people. And that was where, and the whole concept of this tier of authority, and I'm in good terms with all my brothers and friends from those days and the elders. We love each other as brothers. The thing was, you still had to just learn how to serve one another, and not the bottom up, but also the top down. The example the Lord gave us: I'm your master, but I'm your servant. You know, I'm one among you as one who serves. And I think that's the idea of what Alex was talking about. I think was very pure. You know, those were the people who were so in love with Jesus, and not a position of climbing the ladder of some sort of authority. And the ultimate reason why we're here is to serve the people in this world, to love people, and not to just live in our own cocoon and just be unto ourselves. So I hope that answers the question a little bit. Yes?
It seems like there's a little bit of a shift politically and culturally in the younger generation that are shifting sort of towards that communal, rebellion against society, man holding us down, that whole reigniting of that mentality. Do you see that, and do you see dangers and pitfalls for that in our current culture?
I would just say it's a real shock when you're trying to get away from the man and you reach that tipping point where you become the man. That's really fun. But
so we all know that Jesus is the same today as he was yesterday, okay? My heart yearns to see in the church I'm in, I'm not talking about teens, I see this lackadaisical, people's hearts aren't burning with passion like they used to for Christ. So what was that like to be around those people? And I want it today. I think it's possible today. Christ didn't change.
Right.
So where's our Jesus movement? I mean, what can we do?
Well, that's a passionate question and observation, honestly. Guys?
I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I probably have very few, but I do know that we were all into it with everything we had, and the churches that we were involved in were that way too. And evangelism was a key priority. The bands that would go out, artists that would go out, it was all about people getting saved and testimonies. Testimonies are a lost art form in the church, Even in my own church, I don't hear people standing up and saying what God did in their lives, what miracle happened or whatever. So, but that was a significant part of the movement back then, We just, we would go anywhere at the drop of a dime. And literally, it was a dime sometimes. But as long as you had, gas was 23 or 25 cents a gallon, and as long as there was a VW van and a box of granola, you went.
Man, you described it to the T.
Is any part of the answer here that you guys were for something? We were for something. Today we're against so many things.
Right.
I just want to tag onto that for 1 second. One thing that I've noticed is a matter of I don't have a band to pray with when I go do gigs. It's just me. And I've noticed over the last 35 years, it used to be when I would show up in a church to play, the pastor or somebody would come and get me and everybody would pray before everything happened. More often than not, I am the guy who is going to the pastor and saying, can I pray for you and can we pray before we start this? We've developed some sort of interesting reticence to like pray and be vulnerable in front of one another. It's like the schedule's too tightly formulated and we don't even take time to do the basic things that we used to do. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but it kind of, so I say, well, talk is cheap, so I want to be the guy who gets the head usher and the music minister and whatever and say, let's get together, put some prayer together here for this.
Yeah. And the guy in the back,
What's street worship like?
Street worship?
Well, that's another key thing. In the early days, see, people, like what Alex was saying, they wrote about their experience. There's a verse in Revelation that says, they will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They didn't do a whole lot of, we didn't do a whole lot of worship songs out on the street. We did our story songs. And I think we've lost that art. The new art, I mean, they all want to do the great praise and worship songs, but where's those songs that tell about the experience of where we were and where we're at now? And so I actually have a lot of worship teams that want to come out to the streets and they want to play worship. Well, how hard is it to get your church to get involved in worship? And now you're going out to the streets to a bunch of people who want to cuss you out, and they're not going to get it. So you have to do those songs that tell the story of your story, even if you need to use secular, because I do a lot of Bob Dylan, Neil Young, a lot of great songs out there that tell us the story of Jesus' love in those songs. And Bob Dylan's great hit of I Gotta Serve Somebody. People don't realize they got to serve somebody. They're going to serve God, or they're going to serve the devil.
In the garden.
In the garden, yeah, in the garden. Barry McGuire did Eve of Destruction. That song is more prevalent today than it was in '65 when it was recorded. So.
On songwriting too, it seems like so many people say, well, I wrote this song in 15 minutes, like, oh, you spent that long on it. And like, there were songs like Man of the Tunes and True Believers. And, I mean, what's the story behind, I mean, I know what Man of the Tunes, but behind True Believers, what's the reason?
Well, True Believers was brought to me because my record company told me that I couldn't write very good songs. It's true.
Shame on you.
And so, I mean, I can write songs. I'm not, I'm prolific, but not necessarily in a lyrical way. So they felt like I was coming up short with songs, even though I disagreed with them, but that's how it was when you were with record companies. And so they brought this song to me, and I listened to the track, and I listened to the demo of the artist or the writer that wrote it, and I shared it with a couple friends, and this one friend said to me, Phil, you can't do this. This is not you. This is definitely not you. But what I did was I recorded it. I was grateful, and they told me that this song is going to launch you into the next 10 years. I go, okay, if you say so. I ended up making my own version of it, and I kind of made it my own, and now I can do it, and I really can get behind it. But the way it turned out on the recording, it just sounds like kind of pop music and where it was going at the time. I didn't feel it had necessarily the heart that I wanted to come through in a song, but also I was not very record company savvy,
Alex has to leave, so let's get him started.
Now, batting for Alex, McDougall.
To address your thing about somebody writing a song in 15 minutes, the maddening thing about songwriting is that sometimes your best song came in 15 minutes and you try to bottle that lightning again and you can't do it. It's really, it's real maddening. It takes sometimes, years to finish stuff and you kind of go, well, it's not as good as what just came to me in a dream or some weird thing. That's the kind of the bar of soap, thing.
I think my biggest caution is don't become enamored. What causes you to write a song, the depth of feeling, the inspiration, is not equal to whether or not the song is good or done or ready. So if you have to draw a distinction between what the impetus is for you to create versus the thing you actually created. Because sometimes you can mistake the passion of the creative moment, and then you sell yourself short. It's like you built half a house, and you're happy with that, but what you're really looking for is a completely built house. So I think it's a good discipline to try to take a step back. And my motto is always that the battle is won in the rewrite, and it takes and especially when you're writing about sacred topics, nothing is sacred. Slash and burn, make whatever changes you need to do. Just because you felt a real depth of feeling when you came up with the idea doesn't mean that you can shift everything around or toss it out.
Good word.
Yesterday we attended a class, Brenda and I attended a class by Vern Sanders on integrating traditional and contemporary music into worship. In our church we call that blended worship. This morning Brenton Brown did Praise the Lord, an old hymn. And I think he had his own, I suspect he put his own stuff into it. Okay, which became the hook. Last night this Crowder guy did a bunch of old stuff.
And wonderful, huh?
Yeah, so we were with you guys last night, now we're talking about the 60s and 70s and all that. What's happening? Why the old music? We have a Mars Hill church here in this area, and there's a band there that takes the old hymns. What's happening?
They're timeless. A lot of those old hymns are timeless, and they're succinct in their message. They have punch. They reveal truth, you know. And some of the greatest writings came out of the 18th or the 19th century of Christian thought, you know. That, you know, the George McDonald's that influenced the G.K. Chestertons and the C.S. Lewis's. And
Wesley, because of the songwriter.
Yeah.
Luther taking popular drinking songs.
Yeah. A.W. Tozer once famously said that if he was stranded on a desert island, he could get by with a Bible and a hymnal. And I think I would leave it to you to assess the nutritional content if he had a contemporary songbook in front of him. So I think that's a real argument. The reason that we pay attention to tradition is not because we're not creative, but because legacy and heritage and what the church has always believed and done is a huge part of what we do. So while we're busy trying to reinvent the wheel every day of the week, sometimes it's okay to not be the hippest guys in the room. Sometimes it's okay to hearken back to the heritage that we have as the church.
Good word.
The lady in the green sweater?
I would love to just take a trip to some nostalgia and hear some of your experiences in recording in the early 70s with some of the Jesus music that we all know and love, and just please drop a bunch of names. We would love to. Back to nostalgic, please.
Wow. We've already dropped some names of people that we don't necessarily always identify with Christian music.
If I can ask a question, I might bring two names that could help. When I was 18, I loved Keith Green. I'm younger than him. And my brother-in-law was very involved in the large church in Seattle that was always bringing in different performers. Keith Green was one of the worst he ever dealt with. Larry Norman was one of the best he ever dealt with. And so I love Keith Green, so I sent a note to him. I said, tell me what's going on. Why are you so mean and rude to all the people who are helping you put on your performance? And he sent back a great note that says, it's part of who I am and I'm working on it. And so,
yeah, I could say.
So tell us some experiences about your prima donna music people who come in and they want to make sure that their performance is perfect, and they have to balance that with being nice.
Good question. I remember
Larry Norman and Keith Green were the name droppers.
Yeah. I did concerts with Larry Norman in the earliest days with Randy Stonehill. I met Randy and Larry on the very same day. We did a concert in Cincinnati with Lamb, Joel Chernoff, and Rick Coghill, Levi Coghill. And so I got to meet these West Coast Jesus revolutionary musicians, you know, and I was Ohio, you know. But, you know, it's an interesting thing. One of the reasons why I left Glass Harp in August '72 was because I got to listen to the entire first Love Song album. And their music touched me because the Beatles broke up and I was bummed. And then I heard Love Song. And I loved the heart and the spirit of their music a lot. And it encouraged me to go full-time into Christian music at the time. And I didn't know what that meant because I wasn't being offered a record deal. I met, after I toured with Love Song for 3 months, I met Paul Clark on that tour. And I began to work with Paul on a couple of his albums, and we did some dates. And then I had done this album called What a Day in January '73, and then I went with my wife to London, and so all of a sudden, it's 3 years later almost, and I've not done any recording, no creative recording to express my gift and my love of Jesus and my message I wanted to share. So Buck Herring on second chapter of Acts gets a hold of me, and Annie Herring's husband, and he says, "Brother, I'd like to have you come and play on our second album, you know." I said, "Well, okay, we got to talk to the elders, you know." So, so he contacts the elders, and they say, "Okay." So we go out to California, and we become really good friends. And so I got to work with the second chapter of Acts. And then it was Buck Herring and Annie who introduced me and Bernadette to Keith and Melody Green. And the first day he comes into their house, he bounces in, you know, and he's got all this amazing energy. And sits down at an upright piano, and he says, "You got to hear this. I just finished the song with Randy and Todd Fishkin, and it was Your Love Broke Through." He sat and sang the song, and while he sang the song, and I was sitting there looking at him, he's looking me in the eye the entire song, hardly blinking, and it's like, "I want you to hear this song. I want you to hear this song." And Buck, after he sang it, says, "Brother, you ought to record the song on this album that we're working on now," which, you know, that door opened up for me. And then so Keith wrote the words out, wrote the words out for me, and we tracked it with Michael Amardian and Leland Sklar and Jim Gordon and all these fabulous musicians for this album. And so then Keith and I became really good friends. I'm sorry to labor this too long. But, Keith and I became really good friends, and we did a concert at Riverside Calvary Chapel, and he started writing me letters, and he started saying, "Hey, I have a vision of starting my own record company sometime." And this was after he got signed to Sparrow and put out his first album, To Him Who Has Ears to Hear. And he sent me pictures of this place, this location. He said, "What do you think? You want to move to California? And you and Bernadette move out here to California? We can start this record label." And that's where he started Pretty Good Records. And it didn't work out. And he also had some criticisms about our fellowship and the loving thing and the discipleship, shepherding thing. And he was very opinionated about that. And we just listened to him talk, and we go, you know. And then he calls us at home, and he just calls just to apologize. And then the next time we got out to California, he and Melody took me and Bernadette out to dinner, just to say in person, "Sorry that we were judging you." You know, it's like, that's how he was. He was that kind of a guy. He stepped on a lot of toes, and I think he had some, you know, fire and brimstone preaching too, and now and then, and rebuking Christians and all that. And that was his style. He was kind of a John the Baptist, really. And I never had, with Larry Norman, I never had a lot of musical connection in terms of, he invited me to be a part of his label, One Way Records, and I didn't feel it was the right time. So we never had any run-ins, so I have no Larry Norman negative stories. I just think he was awesome as an artist.
Yeah, he was, I toured with him for a couple of years in the 70s, and it was funny, I say I recorded with him, but what that meant was, like, he'd be warming up, I'm playing some jam, really terrible thing or something, you know, in the room with the musicians, and he would go, wait, do that again, you know, or something, and he would record that and then put some lyrics over the top of it, and you'd find it on some weird compilation, like years later, and you're going to go, that was awful, I hope that didn't really, you know, don't put my name on it. But Larry was very, he was one of the best performers I've ever seen, as far as but he could be really harsh on people. People would kind of go, "Hey, bro, we'd like to interview you for our college newspaper," and he could be really, you know, like, "Why would I do that?" You know, or he could be really tough, and I'd kind of go, "Man, what's up?" You know what? So I was never super close to him, but I did, you know, play in his band for a couple of years.
Well, that's a lot. That's touring.
Yeah.
We did some touring.
And it was. The promoters, I'd say, basically were always unhappy. You know, just universally, because the deal that the booking agent would plan would never pan out to be the same as what actually appeared. You know, it would be like, I don't know. It was very strange. We were looking at a lot of college gigs and things like that. A lot of college.
You remember Malcolm and Allman?
Yes.
Any of you remember them?
Yeah,
Two English
absolutely.
songs? I thought they were a breath of fresh air coming from, of course, across the seas again, you know. It was really great to meet them for the first time and see them play, perform.
I just wanted to say, you know, it doesn't happen so much anymore, but back when I was first starting, I'd be driving in a car with the concert sponsor. And they would just kind of want to talk to me, and so I would start hearing stories about so-and-so, and, you know, we had so-and-so in last week, and this happened and that happened, and it kind of turned into a parlor game, because I'd say, are there initials, you know, blah and blah? And they go, well, yeah, how'd you know? You know, it's like, I got to recognize, and realizing that across the country in another car with a concert sponsor and another artist, they're saying, yes, the initials are BB. The not so secret thing about us, and I would never want to justify or soft soap a bad behavior. But the fact is, God is relentless in his preference for using flawed people. And sometimes the only hour of my life that works right is the hour that I'm singing my songs. The other 23 hours, I'm just a goofball. And I'm not, that's not falsely modest. Just ask people who live with me. Ask people who have to be around me. They can tell you. And so I don't suggest that we excuse bad behavior, but I also think we don't elevate people onto a pedestal based on their gifts, because they're just, their lives are just a whole lot more complicated than that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Right.
Yeah, we love to hear of Roby Duke and of course Keith Green, who's lost. Anything on Rich Mullins? Tell Rich Mullins.
I was just getting close to Rich around the time he got in a car accident. And we were talking about maybe collaborating together. In fact, I had recorded this song of his. I hadn't released it, but it's finished and mixed. It's called When Madeline Prays. It's a beautiful song about a little baby, an infant who couldn't see, hear, or speak, and passed away just before he did, of natural causes. And so that's a very special thing. And I've also recorded Hold Me Jesus, which is one of the most beautiful songs ever. It's up there, ranks up there with the Love Broke-Throughs, you know. I just think his Liturgy, Legacy, and Ragamuffin Band is one of the greatest classics of all time in Christian music. And gee, you know, the Creed song, the Apostles' Creed, I believe, just wonderful and powerful. So it's, you know, I did a podcast. I was doing it for about a year and a half, some podcasts, and there. I did one where I was featuring Keith Green and Roby Duke, and I love Roby. I wish I could have known Roby more, but many of you know him very well. You knew him very well. You knew him very well, and you too. Did you tour with him? A little bit. And also Larry Norman, Jackie Street's the great bass player who toured. And there was also, well, since then Tom Howard has passed away. And Tom Howard's a great pianist and arranger that we all got very close to because they moved to Nashville. We all have our time, you know. I thought I was going to have my time last April when I had an episode that occurred and put me in the hospital. And but you know, while we live and move and have our being, let's love. Let's let the Lord open the doors, and when someone asks you to give an account of the hope that's in you, do it with gentleness and patience, and just keep the light on, you know? Keep the light on. And also, I feel very excited about these times we live in, because this is a world where a lot of people are asking, like, really, is God love? When I keep hearing about, you know, if you know, God loves you, and if you meet his conditions, he won't send you to hell for eternity. There's a lot of people asking those questions in these days, you know. And so it's making me study more and making me look at the good news of the gospel with a capital G and a capital N. And I'm finding out that I'm having more dialogue with people about the gospel and what it really means and what Jesus Christ really has accomplished for us all.
I'm having fun nowadays being part of a mega church, which sounds kind of weird. I enjoyed today more than I did in the early Jesus movement. I was just trying to maybe find myself back then, and it was, kind of, life is a big journey and everything, but right now it seems like being involved in a church that's wanting to develop new music, wanting to raise people up, that's into reaching out in evangelistic ways in their own style that they do. It's a large church in Southern California, and I find today I would really look forward to going to work as part of that. I'm not necessarily all that nostalgic about the old days of stuff I enjoy now. Maybe that's just my own wiring, but right now it seems like, well, I look forward to I really work with some great people. I think we're making an impact. I do feel chastened by the stuff that we've talked about how are we just hugging ourselves in a sense. I don't like that part of it. I've been fortunate to be part of a lot of this stuff. It's just really way under the radar, but as a sideman or a songwriter or singing, doing background vocals, or playing with some really talented people like Mark Hurd, who's a very close friend, and Tom Howard and Randy Stonehill, being part of their careers and being friends for years and years. A lot of history, but I've always been more of a, just plug me in somewhere and hang out. And with, I've known people, Alex, my buddy, who had to bail, and known each other for 40 years. I work with, I still work. I talked to Tommy Coombs, original Love Song guy, and we travel the world together to this day. We played in Japan, Africa twice, Eastern Europe. All the stuff is still going on all over the world, and I'm still involved in outreaches and I think so. Now is pretty fun for me. I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's like. But there's always room for growth. There's always room for. I need to be on my knees. If it's like I worked with Richie Furay too, and the last time I saw him and had a really good conversation with him was about a year ago. I worked with him for about 5 years in the late 70s, and I looked at him and I went like, if I would have known what we were doing back in 77 or 76. I would have prayed a whole lot more. I had just seen a Bob Dylan documentary, and Richie was kind of ahead of Bob Dylan as far as a conversion of a rock guy that people knew a little bit. He was a few years ahead of Bob, and different giftings, different style, and the whole personality and everything. But looking at what we were doing, I was kind of like, man, I wish I had it to do over again. We would have done a whole lot better. Well, that's just kind of how life is, I think. Some people have come up to me and said, wow, I love that worship stuff you did in, 81 or something. I'm going, wow, yeah, that's right. If I had to do that over again, I would really try and redo that. But just approach like tomorrow. I got a church job, and I'm going to show up there, and it's a blast. I'm looking, I'm going, man, I can't wait to, there's problems, relationship stuff, and you kind of got to go, okay, I got to watch how I handle this relationship here. But I still got to, be able to find a groove and play the right notes and sing great, hopefully. And so I'm looking forward to the challenge that's ahead of me. Bob has a concert tonight. I mean, we're still all, is it open to the public?
Yeah. I don't know it's a house concert at a place here locally called the Schaefer Bailey Mansion. And, but I don't know where we are on terms of capacity, but if you're interested, come talk to me.
Small house.
Yeah. It's like a B&B type of thing, yeah.
And Phil, you're probably got church and stuff tomorrow, right? Are you playing or?
I'm playing at Calvary Fellowship tonight.
Wayne Taylor?
Yeah,
Wayne Taylor Church, Mount Lake Terrace, something?
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys know the streets around here. It's pretty weird.
So you know how a lot of pastors, big name pastors, are taken down. The fame, the fortune, the power, Have you seen that with friends or acquaintances in the music industry through the years who have just, lost their faith, just kind of blown it all?
I always wonder what happened to B.J. Thomas, because I thought he was great, but a lot of Christians didn't treat him very nicely.
Oh yeah, I think we have a lot to answer for corporately for how poorly we treated that guy. It was horrible.
And Dylan.
Yeah, well, Bob Dylan's smart. He didn't let anybody control him.
He would never have any truck with being the voice of a generation. He didn't like that. So when people wanted to make him the voice of the Christian church, he didn't like that much either.
Yeah, well, U2 decided to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And they've had their influence and power and all that. But no, I don't know. I only know a few pastors really, and I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
How do I say this? I think if we can, sometimes when you get involved in the Christian music business, at least as it existed years ago, some artists participated in a campaign of perception about how they were presented, that when people found out they had feet of clay and they were sinners and they were goofed up, then a lot of people got hurt. I have a lot of bad stuff on my resume that I'm not very happy about, but I wasn't presented as God's chosen guy for the moment. And so when people find out that Bob Bennett's kind of an idiot, it's really no surprise. I think that's why it's hard to measure phone calls that do not come anymore. It's hard to measure what people say when you're not looking or listening.
Which leads me to a point that I want to make to you guys. These guys have paved the road for a lot of us to be able to do what we do. And if you guys have any end at all with your pastors, get a hold of these guys. They would love to come to your church and minister to your church. Take them out to dinner, put them in a nice hotel, and just love on them.
It's all about the snacks.
I think they're actually very easy to get a hold of. There's, times when they can come to your